Welcome back to another episode of What We Share, a podcast where I sit down with artists that I've come across in my life, and we talk about their art, their life, and how it all intertwines. Hope you have a relaxing holiday. Today I have Jo Brook, an artist from Montana who's currently stationed in New York City. You probably saw her in a recent performance in Alabama Shakespeare Festival's The Christmas Carol. We'll talk about how she came to the arts and how she navigated the industry when she discovered her disability, and finding and creating safe spaces. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Everybody. My name is Jo Brook, and I'm an actor and a musician based out of New York City. And I grew up in Montana, um, uh, in a very rural part of Montana. My family were ranchers. Our family and my family are ranchers and farmers, um, and then I eventually decided to pursue theater and music, and that brought me to New York City. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay, so again, just thank you so much for being here and sharing this space with me. And like I said, we were talking a little bit about before of just now sort of everything being done with Christmas Carol and such. Now everything's sort of slowed down. There's sort of that jitteriness of just being slowed and just that work momentum.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't able to see this show, but I
Okay.
heard that everyone kind of came back from the previous show, and I saw the show back in 2023 it was. So
Yeah.
yeah, I remember seeing that show. So when I heard it was the same show, I was like, okay, I'm a bit tired.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone came back except just a handful of people, and I was actually one of the new people. So this past
Oh.
Christmas Carol was my first time on the show. Yeah, I mean, a wonderful group of people. The crew, the cast, all the kids. Yeah, it was a really special group.
Oh yeah, I definitely recognize some of the kids as well because it's always so interesting, working and just seeing the kids from your own community, just kind of scroll on by, and I'm just like, oh okay, yeah, I know you, and oh yeah, I know your dad. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, that was, when you go out on an acting contract, it can be very isolating and you're kind of in your own little bubble. And it often feels very separate from the community. And I think that's the great thing about doing shows when there's a cast of children, because it really pulls you into the community and you get to know their families. Uh, and all those kids in Christmas Carol, they know each other and they do shows with each other and other activities. And um, so that was kind of exciting to go come into their world.
and how did Alabama treat you? I guess would be the how was it being in that community?
Yeah, I love Alabama. I had never been to Alabama before I worked at Alabama Shakes. I also think that Montgomery is a really, really special town. A beautiful history, really, really kind people, and great food, amazing museums, and the theater itself. Is a really special place. It's such a gem, and I mean, incredible people. The facilities are insane, and it's an honor to be in Montgomery and to be part of that that story and part of the theater. So
Okay. Well, my first question that I remember writing down was pretty much just what made you want to be an artist?
yeah, I started, I really kind of came into the world surrounded by music and storytelling. My both my parents are musicians and played a lot for us kids when we were small. And I would wake up in the mornings and the first thing I would hear was usually my dad playing his guitar and singing. And that's kind of how we woke up in the morning. And, when we got a little bit older, we started picking instruments up that were randomly laying around the house. There was a fiddle, like an adult size fiddle that was laying around our house forever. And when I was 5, I just started picking it up and it was too big for me. I should have been playing a smaller fiddle, but my parents were like, just let her roll with it. We'll see if she likes it. Um, and and all my siblings ended up playing, and my older sister is a professional musician, and that's what she does for a living now. Um, and so it was just kind of just a part of me really early on and from the get-go. And then as I was mulling over like the different careers that one can have when I was like, in high school and getting ready to decide those things, I I felt like I really couldn't imagine a world where I w- I didn't have artistry and music and storytelling in my life. And I also felt really drawn to it because I thought this is something that's risky and this is something that I think would really really push me, and I think I just wanted that challenge, and wanted to see if I could do it, and I really didn't know if I could do it or make a living at it, so it's been a rush to like prove to myself that I can do it, and every job is is a blessing and an opportunity. So
Yeah, that's what something I've been thinking a bit about that as well. Just like, because I've always have a different narrative of just like how did I sort of like came to be, I guess, sort of like an artist into the world of theater, and usually involves a story of me being like improv one day, of just like because usually I started theater as a background person, just like helping like move the sets and stuff until like one day my teacher was like, "Yeah, this is an assignment. You got to go act up in there." And I'm just like, "Man." And I remember I didn't know much about improv, but I just pulled out a bowl. It was something like, "Yeah, man, just like an angry guy or something like that." I just remember like, okay. And I kind of recalled back to when I was little, because it's sort of like I was raised much of as an only child, so most of the time I would just have all I had was like sort of myself. And I was like, okay, would it be cool if I just imagined it though? It's just like, so I'll always like imagine like a setting and just being like, okay, kind of like basically a big large game of make believe by myself. And and so I was like, okay, just think of it like that. Just go about it like it's make believe. And
Yeah,
I went about it and people liked it. So they're just like, yeah, man, just keep auditioning for this show. And that's kind of like how I sort of like drained in. And it was
mhm,
so easy for me to just, I guess, do it because I guess when you think about it in a certain way, it's like, oh, I've been acting for a while. and
yeah,
I'm it was just like, yeah, it's easier to just be on stage and be sort of someone else. And even when they're sort of like laughing, you don't really take it personally because it's just like, yeah, I wouldn't do this, but I'm just portraying someone else. You're laughing at that person actually. And
yeah. There's a lot of security in knowing that you're representing somebody else, and I think that's why like things like this, interviews and like public speaking, and it's very difficult for me because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just me, no character. It's just, it's so raw. And yeah, and when you have something like a song or a character to kind of as your foundation, it's so much easier to manage, and for me personally. So it sounds like same for you.
yeah. And again, thank you so much for willing to, I guess, be up here today and just like, show yourself.
Of course.
And my second question was pretty much I would love to know more about what the Snowy Mountain Sisters were and sort of like what provoked to sort of like start that band.
Yeah.
It's a two-part question, so I'll just start with the first part.
Yeah, yeah. So the Snowy Mountain Sisters is an all-female bluegrass band that I founded in 2015 with my older sister Brittany. I referred to her a little bit earlier, and uh, over the years, the band has morphed, and we've had a bunch of different members. It's kind of become a collective, so we fold people in based on their availability or, like whatever the gig calls for. We've also recorded a lot of things together. We don't have our own album, like the Snowy Mountain Sisters album, but we each have, our own projects that we've worked on, and then we've folded in the band members to support us on those albums and things. Um and it's just it's been such a I don't know, such an opportunity for me to be a part of something like that. It's been an opportunity to lead and to practice my leadership skills, and it's made me a better musician and a better performer and a better human. And I I guess what inspired me to start the band, for the first few years of living in New York, I was playing a lot. I was playing a lot in bands, and I was on the road, like doing regional theater shows a lot. And most of that was actor musician work. So, and I would say the majority of the projects that I worked on, I was the only woman in the band or in the cast. And, it had a lot of challenges, and I had so much fun, but also some of those spaces that I was in, sometimes they weren't safe spaces. Sometimes my collaborative voice really didn't hold a lot of value to the other collaborators in the room. And I didn't really feel like my skills were being fully realized and utilized. And so I think I hit a wall there, at a point where I was like, I just don't want to do this as much as I'm doing it, and I need a safe space, and I want to find a space or create a space where the rules are not those rules, and where my voice holds more value. And so, um, really, that's what it was. I was like, well, I'm going to make my own band, and it'll have my own rules. And really, like, a huge part of making it safe and collaborative was to have all women in the space and women that I could trust. And so the first ask was my older sister, Brittany. Um, of course, we've played together since we were toddlers. And she kind of dragged her feet a little bit. She was like, I don't know, I don't really want to be in a band. And I kind of just said, look, I don't want to do this without you, and I don't think I can do this without you. So you're in the band. So I very much strong-armed her. The second ask was a lady named Courtney Cowart. I actually barely knew Courtney. I played backup fiddle for a band at a bar in Long Island City, and she was one of the featured singers for that band that day. And I remember just meeting her and hearing her sing and talk and thinking, like, that lady is so badass and uh, so empowered and strong, and I need more of that. So then I randomly got her number and texted her, and she was like, heck yeah, let's do it. Barely knew her. The third ask was another lady named Margaret Mugg, and I had heard about her around town. I just knew that she was a great bass player, super rough around the edges. She was usually the only woman in any band that she played with. And I was like, okay, that energy is what I'm looking for. So, Margaret Mugg. And then uh, a couple other gals, Susan O'Day and Marcy McWigan, hopped in, percussionist and another guitar player and vocalist. And I had met them through some theater productions that I'd done regionally. So that was the core group. And I think right away we hit it off so hardcore. And I think it was a little serendipitous. I think we were all looking for a space like that, a space where we could kind of throw stuff out and practice and experiment, and we could have more of a voice in the space. And um yeah, we had a ball. and we're still having a ball. We still play out, and yeah, I'm very grateful for the group.
Yep. Yeah. And my second question that was sort of like playing to bit of that was that how has your like Montana like upbringing sort of like was involved in that? Because I did listen to some of the music, and I remember what stuck out to me was just the sort of the sound because well yeah, all music is sound, but but just like it was so distinct, and I was just like, okay, there's something about this that's so distinct. So I remember just like typing in, it's like Montana music, traditional music, and it pulled up Yellowstone,
Oh,
and and I was like, you know what? Yeah, I probably heard sound from there of just like clips from Yellowstone, but no, but it was just like that sound was just so familiar and so distinct. So I was just wondering if that played a part into it and how that kind of like guided you potentially.
hmm, that's a really fun question. I feel well, um, a logistical thing. The Snowy Mountains is the mountain range that I grew up next to in Montana. And my home and those mountains, they still call to me and are I have wonderful memories of growing up there. And so I decided to name the band the Snowy Mountain Sisters after that mountain range. Um, I would say think the thing that has influenced me the most from growing up in Montana, like I had five kids in my class when I went to this tiny little country school. Things were very far away. Like a legit grocery store was 2 hours away. You know, to go get music lessons, fiddle lessons, it was like 2, 3 hours away, depending. And um, so it's very isolated, and that caused me to like lean on my family more. And so my siblings and my dad and I and my mom would play music together, and I think that that made us tighter. And like I really developed a an appreciation for how music can connect you to people really in a powerful way. And I experienced that with my family, but then also going out of our way, 2, 3 hour drives to go to fiddle camp and jam sessions and the fiddlers picnic in Livingston, Montana, and going to people's houses for just to play music with them. Like that was powerful because communing with people in Montana takes a lot of effort and it takes time. And so I think I developed like a strong appreciation, and I didn't take it for granted. Like when you get to connect with people, how important and how special that is and magical that can be, particularly when you are coming together to play music. So I feel like I felt that at a really early age, and I think, looking for a safe creative space, I knew that that meant communing, and I knew that meant bringing people together. And and I think that's something that I thrive at and something that I love doing. I love bringing people together and creating a space for these types of things and these types of connections. So yeah, I'd say my Montana upbringing kind of made that part of me. So
I typed in the notes for myself of just like how I sort of felt about sort of the idea of how your upbringing sort of and your environment can sort of like morph sort of like that part of your identity and it's how like you lead on and kind of because as of recently I've definitely been reflecting the ideas of like okay, I've lived close to Montgomery my entire life, and surrounded by my family and sort of the history of Montgomery and sort of seeing how those seeds definitely affected me and kind of became sort of like my North Star, just like how I guess not I guess to operate in the world, but also just to I guess sort of just a place to keep like reflecting and keep sitting. And because I remember I was in Southern Writers Festival, and we were
Mhm.
sort of talking about sort of like, okay, what stories can we tell about the South? I remember I wrote this script for like it was very bombastic and very like just big. And but I knew like when reading it out, when I was just like, oh man, this doesn't sit right at all. This doesn't sit right. And I was just sort of like contemplating about sort of like these ideas because we kept thinking about the ideas of just like, okay, Southern stories. And
Yeah.
sort of like looking around and seeing that, oh, okay. I mean, was the South to me as just like a black man, just like was it to me? And sort of the writing, I guess, from trying to answer that question became very more personal, and I guess very better because people liked it. And I was just like, so I was just, hmm?
Oh, sorry. What was that with Alabama Shakes? That
Oh
festival?
yes, that was with
Yeah.
Alabama Shakes.
Okay,
Yeah,
I remember hearing about that. That is so cool.
yeah. Oh yeah, it's definitely a great program. It was fun. It was like my first and last time because I was like a senior, like I already graduated at that point. So I was just like, yeah, this is my last run.
Same.
But yeah, and it's at times I do feel a little lost of just like, oh man, what was really like given to me, I guess, as like an adult now. But
Yeah.
yeah, just thinking, just there's a lot of history here, and I'm
Oh,
toying with those ideas of just like how that applies to me at all. But
yeah.
my third question was this one was a little bit more sensitive, and I'm so glad I just sent you the questions because I didn't want to like throw you off with any of them because I know some of them might be like very sensitive. So, but
Nah,
yeah.
it's all right.
But my one of my questions was like if you could talk about sort of like that moment you were diagnosed and how that moment was for you and sort of like how you've been processing that throughout the years. It's a two-part question, so I'll just ask the first part and then ask the second. Or
Yeah.
if you want me to drill through all of it.
Yeah. Well, let's see where we get to. I it's a big question, and I think yeah, so I'm hard of hearing. I have profound hearing loss or deafness in both my ears. And so I guess what that means, just for listeners, it means that I have in my mid to upper ranges or frequencies, they're not strong. So,
Mhm.
I don't have any upper frequencies. So that really impacts mostly speech, how I hear speech and uh how I access, conversations. Luckily, like music and those pitches are still pretty much there. It's just uh like with there are a lot of the upper frequencies occur in like the rhythms and like the percussiveness of music. And so sometimes music sounds like a big blob of music rather than what I think most people hear it as. So um yeah, and I wear hearing aids, and I've started to sign in the last few years just to give myself another tool for expressing myself. um but I was going back to the diagnosis. Um, I was diagnosed in, I believe, 2017. My sister Brittany, we'd been playing in the band for a couple years at that point, and she started telling me that she was noticing that I wasn't keeping up in ways that she thought I should. And she's like, "I'm concerned that you have some hearing loss, and I think we should get it checked and get ahead of it." And I waved her off for a long time. Eventually, she got me an appointment to get my hearing checked through Actors Equity. We both went, um, hearing tests done, and sure enough, I had profound hearing loss. And the audiologist, Michelle, said, you need to get treated as soon as you can because we want to prevent more loss and you need support. So that was like, I would say mostly it was just shocking. I was so surprised um, that I had hearing loss, or that my hearing loss was as severe as it was. That was just like I was blown away by it. And then like learning that I would need hearing aids, I was like, wow, that's the next level up too. And then uh I think like the weight of it really didn't hit me right away because not that it's like massively weighty, like I'm great, I'm doing fine.
Hmm.
But I think I didn't realize how much it had been affecting my life and my relationships, and I didn't realize the journey that I was about to go on and the things that I was going to discover about myself. And so, yeah, diagnosis was like, wow, interesting. Okay, let's do it. And I think as I went along with my hearing loss and like learning more about what I was hearing and what I wasn't hearing, I started asking people questions like, how do you hear that? Or, just really tuning in and people saying, I am hearing this. And then really like noticing that I'm not hearing it at all, or I'm barely hearing it. Um, I also like it started kind of becoming more obvious why I had struggled socially for such a long time. Um, I um I don't know. It goes back a long time, but I isolate a lot and I would kind of shy away from conversations. I would let people talk for me. Um I would completely like phase out of a conversation and just not listen at all. So I think start things like that, the habits that I'd formed socially they started to it started to click in why I was like that. And that took a toll on me because I felt that my hearing loss had kind of covertly been sabotaging me in some ways that I just didn't see. Um and then uh it I think I started to get more and more in my head with my music, understanding that I'm not hearing it the same way that everybody is hearing it, understanding that um like when I am playing, I I can't hear I actually am not hearing what I think I was hearing, and it's interesting what your brain fills in for you when you don't know that you're missing it. And so I think I started actually getting very depressed and really struggling with my mental health. And then the pandemic hit and that
Mm.
exacerbated everything for so many people. And but yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time like feeling sorry for myself. I, I spent a lot of time trying to understand uh how my hearing loss had affected me through the years. And then I think after a certain amount of time of like pitying yourself, you're like, I have to stop. Like
Mm.
I have to get off my ass and I have to do something about this. So um yeah, so I I feel like in the last several years since the pandemic, I have slowly and gradually found more and more tools to cope with things. I have found support. Um, I run a support group, and it's sponsored by a grant through the Center for Hearing and Communication here in Manhattan. Um, those people have become some of my best friends. Most of them are deaf and are professional musicians or composers or actors. Um, I also, through learning ASL, have found a lot of power in having that as a tool, like an extra tool for expression in my life. And uh, I've also met some really great people in the deaf community, and learned so much about that culture and really, really appreciate it. Um, I've also like started to get my voice back in terms of like not just asking for accommodations and access around my disability, but it's also made me realize how much I'm not using my voice in other areas of my life. and it's empowered me. And, you know, it's empowered me to start speaking up more for myself and to, um, I don't know, I guess I have a feeling, I think there's another question that's coming, so I'm not gonna totally go down that rabbit hole, but um, yeah, it's been such a journey and kind of a shit show in some areas, but I keep telling myself um that nobody is going on this journey, you know, and that's true for everybody in their journey. And like, I don't know, I really don't know any other fiddle players uh who are my age and who have as much hearing loss as I do, and kind of have the experiences and the career that I have. Like, I don't have a map for this type of thing. And so, you know, trying to find some acceptance and forgiveness for myself when I think that I'm not moving, progressing fast enough, or when I'm not doing my best, you know? So, yeah.
Uh, this I think, yeah, I wrote in the notes as well. Just like this, very much reminded me because reading through your website and reading through your article. That's another question I'll probably ask down the line, and it sort of reminded me of. It just made me think of the times where my mother was diagnosed. This was with MS, like multiple sclerosis, and I was in high school, so I just remember like I don't fully remember the moment I heard, but I just
Yeah.
remember like just hearing about it, and I think at that time I think I was just like very egocentric, not
Yeah,
ego
of
like
course. We're in high school.
not like oh everything's about me, but it's more well I guess so, but I was just thinking like okay, but I got a test tomorrow, and it didn't really hit until like moments before where she's like, "Oh, she, oh, there's talks about her losing her job. What? That's crazy. Oh, she's can't walk all of a sudden. That's weird. Do I have to help her?" Or it's like, "Oh, she's forgetting certain things. I may have to start remembering things for her or like keeping track of things." And
Wow.
I think it didn't really hit until like recently or like really like when I like graduated high school and started like I guess becoming an adult where it's just like, oh wow, there's certain things that perhaps my mom really I mean, she's getting better. Of course, she's like taking her meds and such, and it's like but there's always just like a moment where you kind of like see it. It's like, was it always like this? Or was I just like in or was there a change? Or was I just there was just a phase in my life where I was just in my own head and just like
Ah,
dealing with my own problems. So it's kind of like yeah, it was very much like an examining back and looking back and just like questioning kind of like that relationship and sort of like, oh, now being an adult, there's sort of a role reversal of just like, oh, you may have to take care of her now. Or like you gotta like there's no necessarily full like passive words, words are crazy. But just like kind of like
hey.
being idle, but more just like, okay, I kind of gotta be more active a little bit and just like making sure that she's okay. I mean, and I think she's okay. She's doing well, but there's also just like, okay, I need to be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, things, when things like that hit, we don't know everything about the thing because we've not really we may have not experienced it before. Like I can be as on my I can be up on my high horse about advocacy and disability and hearing loss, but the fact is, before that, I had no knowledge or specialty in hearing loss, and like no awareness of like a very acute awareness of the deaf community and culture. And so yeah, I think it just like it takes time for something to sink in and for you to realize like the breadth of what, I don't know, illness and these changes that come into our lives, like the impact it's going to make on us. So it takes time.
Yeah. High school for me, I was just like thinking about, I was like, high school for me was very much like learning other people had problems and just because I was just like, I just remember like that was the moment where I was just like, and also learning about my friends' struggle with mental health. And it's just like, oh, wait, I'm not the only one feeling this way. Oh, I'm not so special. It's just like,
Yeah, and I think that's the trap. I think whenever that's the trap with like self-pity and like that inward focus that we all just it's just natural to focus inward because I think it's a way of taking care of ourselves. But yeah, that outward awareness, like you said, when you kind of key in to other people's challenges with their mental health and it's powerful and it really changes your perspective. So
and my second question to that, which I think is really going to like start rolling into it, is just like after that diagnosis, how did you begin to navigate the industry differently?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, I really, at first, I kind of went about it pretty quietly. I thought, well, I've been passing for a long time. I think I'm just going to keep going with that. And it wasn't until 2019 I was doing a production of Once at the Cape Playhouse, and Hunter Foster was directing. And it was the first time that I felt like I needed to maybe say something because I wasn't keeping up with certain things. And I was like, we're kind of at a high level right now. Hunter Foster's there. And then, like all the musicians in the room except me and a couple others had been on the national tour or on the Broadway production. And I felt like there were higher stakes for representing myself in the best light. And I was like, I don't want to pass. Like I want them to know my challenges and I want them to help me. And so I remember after rehearsal one day asking Hunter if I could speak to him. We had a very short conversation where I told him about my hearing loss, how it was relatively new, although at that point I had known for 2 years. And and I started to cry. I was like, it was amazing how sensitive and like I was in so much, I was just so triggered to tell somebody about it. And I remember Hunter's face like, oh my gosh, this she she doesn't have a handle on this. So, that was the first time that disclosed and said something like that, and it was so vulnerable and so messy, and obviously I cried and probably blubbered along and didn't convey any kind of like real solution to anything, but that's my first time. And then I think um really wasn't until after the pandemic, I started finding more of a voice to ask for what I needed in a rehearsal space and in the theater. Um, I actually I feel like in those early days of trying to find my voice and advocacy and advocating for myself, I feel like I was still going through so much pain and still processing a lot of pain from all of this that it put a lot of strain on my professional relationships and it put some strain on my friendships that I had within the industry. And it got to kind of a breaking point where I had to step back from music and give myself some air, which was very hard to do because I'd never given myself any air from music. Music was my oxygen, so it felt very strange to do that. After that breaking point, I had a falling out with a friend, and I had a falling out with a project that I was working on and a band. And um, the next thing that happened after that was I started writing a solo show about my experiences. And so I was starting to process my feelings in writing for the stage, which is like so healthy for me. And then I read a play called Silent Sky by Lauren Gunderson, and you must know it.
I had to do a project on it. I had
Oh,
to
awesome.
I had to read it, and then I had to build a set, and it was horrible. But I read it, and there was a play here recently in Wetumpka Depot. I know the actress who played her name. She was the lead person, but
Amazing.
Har- Harriet.
Henrietta?
Yep, that. But sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt. Yeah.
No, no. Yeah, so I read Silent Sky, and then I thought well, the main character of Silent Sky is a hard of hearing woman who wears hearing aids, and I immediately was so inspired and just blown away by this play. It's a beautiful play, and Lauren Gunderson is one of my favorite playwrights. And um and I think one of the country's favorite playwrights. She's like so highly produced. Um or frequently produced. Well, then I looked for theaters that were doing that production, and one was at Barnstormers Theater in New Hampshire, and the other one was at Oslo Rep in Florida. And I auditioned for them, and I like reached out and told them that I wanted to be part of the show, and I ended up booking both of them, both the productions. And I think like those were such valuable spaces for me because one, like both are amazing theaters. Like they are very good at creating safe spaces and making a rehearsal room feel like familiar and like family. Um and I they taught me a lot about like accessibility and advocacy and safe spaces and what safe spaces can look like. And then in turn, I think being able to play a character who was disabled, I no longer had to pass as hearing. I suddenly was able to be disabled and play myself inside this other disabled character. And then and it became that like my perspective actually informed dramaturgically informed the show in a dramaturgical way. And so it I learned to appreciate that. And I was like, oh, my voice and my perspective actually has value. Like disabled doesn't mean a deficit. It doesn't mean wrong. It doesn't mean I have to hide it. It actually can inform certain spaces. And then trying my best when I am playing a hearing character, like in Christmas Carol, I was not a deaf or hard of hearing character. I was hearing. And also I played fiddle on the stage. So like how when I don't get to play a disabled character or a hard of hearing or deaf character, like how can I still bring myself into the space, and how can I find value in my voice when I'm interacting with people in the rehearsal space? And yeah, so that getting to do that show was a huge breakthrough for me in accepting myself and accepting my hearing loss and kind of like recognizing it as a little bit of a superpower, something that could actually have a really positive impact in my life. So, yeah. So, it's really really special.
I definitely have been noticing like sort of like the importance for you of just like safe spaces and
Mhm.
the ability to sort of like organize and navigate organize those spaces
Yeah.
and just sort of elevating your voice. And I think that's so special to me because again, just that proactive nature of it, of constantly like basically leading the charge of and navigating organizing, and part of me almost kind of like wonders like how is it to sort of like organize those spaces, and what do you think really takes to like build a space like that, if you could give out any tips.
Yeah, um that's something that I know, like you said, I think it's something that I'm passionate about. It's something I talk a lot about and something that I want to do more of. And I think that's starting to take shape. I mean, I'm in my mid 30s, and like I guess kind of still early career, but mid career, I suppose. And I feel like these things are starting to take shape, and I'm getting more finding more opportunities to be a leader in a space. And I think it's such a huge responsibility to be a caretaker of a space. And also like it's a lot of lip service to be like, this is a safe space, but like if you don't follow through on it, then like that's not okay. And so I think, I'm definitely learning more every time I go to a new theater. I learn new things about how people create safe spaces. I learn about how people fail in that aspect. Like, and it's actually it's information to me. It's like, okay, I see they were trying, but they weren't able to fu fulfill the commitment that they made to providing an accessible, safe space to people, or a supportive space to their staff. And so that's all good information, and I think it's really valuable to me. And like also, I am I'm white. I and I only have my perspective as in this very small niche of disability. And disability is like such a vast group. And so I think just having like continuing to be humble and curious is where I want to live, because I I want to I do want to create spaces where people feel taken care of, but I also know that I don't have all the information, and uh and I have a lot more to learn. So, yeah, I think that's where I'm at. And um but if we're talking like logistically, something that I learned at Oslo Rep was the practice of stepping into the space at the top of the rehearsal day and just having a quick check-in about accessibility and those needs. And you just go around and say like, does everyone have what they need right now to do the work that they need to do? And that was such a great opportunity for me, because I didn't have to stop the rehearsal and make the space and say, hey guys, yesterday I really struggled with this. Do you think that we could make this adjustment? It was actually carved out into rehearsal, and it was carved out at the top of rehearsal. So it was the foundation, and it was a priority, and it didn't come later. In fact, its accessibility is so important that they put it at the top of rehearsal. And that made me feel welcome in the space, and it made me feel like I could use my voice, and that like I wasn't throwing off the schedule, or I wasn't asking for too much. So um I really appreciate that. I think that accessibility check-in is not just for like disability. I think it can span across like any challenge, like any it gives space for someone to say like, I didn't quite feel safe in that moment. And safe, like your life is not threatened, but the the environment and
Mm.
the productivity is.
Wasn't nurturing to you. It wasn't nurturing to your needs.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. And one of my last questions I really wanted to get into was like your article you wrote. I believe it was titled "Being Hard of Hearing Shouldn't Be This Hard," and I remember reading it and just sort of like very being invested in sort of like the stories you were telling and the people that you were gathering and your experience. And it was very nice to sort of like you put the audience sort of in your perspective. And I just wanted to know sort of what brought you into wanting to write about your experience and really share that, because like you said in the earlier, uh, putting yourself out there like that is a bit like uh, a bit scary to you. So I just wonder what brought you onto it.
Yeah, yeah. So I mentioned it earlier, but I actually started writing my thoughts out as a solo show about my experiences. And then after writing for several months, I realized that it was less of a play, and it was more of a journalistic piece.
Mm.
So I actually ran the idea by a mentor, Jen Waldman. She runs a studio here in New York for theater makers, and I've been part of her studio for over 10, I think 10 years now is how long I've been a part of her studio. I love her, and she's a big thinker and an ideas person. And I actually had a one-on-one brainstorming session with her a couple years ago, or a few years ago now, and told her about this thing that I was doing and the things I was writing. And she was like, Joe, I think that maybe you should publish. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, I guess I could publish it on like a blog on my website. And she was like, no, no, no. I think you should write to like Backstage or American Theater Magazine or something and see if they will publish you. And I thought it was ridiculous. I was like, this is never gonna happen. But I did. I followed through and I wrote to American Theater Magazine and a bunch of other publications, and they responded and offered to support the project and to pay me. And and yeah, and then it turned into an article, and I interview as I started writing more of the article and developing it, I realized that like I was very uncomfortable and uneasy about publishing an article only about my perspective. And I and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna find other people who are like in the same game as me. And so I reached out. I did a bunch of outreach, finding people who are artists and who have hearing loss or identify as deaf or hard of hearing, and interviewed them. And one, I made such good friends with those people. And some of them are still in my support group at the center. And then others I've collaborated on things with, and uh so they've become really good friends. And then also they're like looking outward away from myself was such a big step for me. Like we said, like that new perspective that it's this is much bigger than me, and like this is just life, and a lot of people experience these things. Um and I was feeling like really unique and isolated, and that's just not the case. And so that article really it opened me up, and again, it was like a huge breakthrough for me, kind of progressing and moving forward.
I will say, like, there's such an interesting feeling of just like having, I guess, a community and just sort of realizing that, oh, this is bigger than you. Because at times I kind of go back and forth of just like, on one hand, it's like, it's great to have, I guess, someone else to talk to about this, to share this experience with. But then on the other hand, a part of my mind just like, why? Why? It's just like, why am I in a state where I have to share this with you? I guess part of it is like, I think a part of it is a mix of like, oh, I don't want to like, you know, just throw my stuff onto you.
Mm.
And but then on the other hand, it's also, I guess part of it's like, oh man, I'm not in that prime state of just like, oh yeah, I can take care of myself. I'm strong by myself. I don't need anyone else to sort of like share where I got going on. I'm good. I'm great. And yeah,
Yeah, I think like realizing that actually like sometimes sharing is it's not really about you, it's about being there for the other person and letting them know that they're not alone. Like I there are people that I've met through the support group and through the article that they're on the same page as me. They're like, I was so alone before this, and now I feel like, people starting to disclose their disability at work in the rehearsal spaces. People starting to sing again after they haven't sung for 10 years. Um, and like we by sharing and by opening up, I feel like we have all empowered each other to like I don't know, find ourselves again. When I think hearing loss can make you feel like you're losing yourself a little bit.
I definitely think for me, sharing has become, I guess, a bit profound of just like, I guess, a point of release. It's a point of like, oh, okay, my
Yeah.
truth, I got it out there now. It's off my chest. I can just go home now. And it's definitely different when it's like, oh, people that you don't really see much in life or don't really expect much are like showing their support and doing these types of things for you. And it's just like, oh, okay. Okay. People like me being vulnerable and sharing.
Yeah,
Okay.
people come out of the woodwork for you, and it always it surprises me how vast our community is, especially our artistic community. And you're like, "Oh my gosh, like no, I have so many friends and so many people in my life who genuinely care, you know." So,
One last question. What is your favorite memory of like being in theater or being in your band?
okay, I thought of so many memories, and I actually don't know which one I'm gonna pick right now. Um, ugh, I mean, it's so full. Um, okay, I'll tell a story about my sister, um, just because she's been, I mean, really, she's the reason that I don't know, she's the reason that I've like kind of this whole journey started. So I guess I'll tell a story about her. Um, so again, her name is Brittany. Brittany is uh the most theatrical person that I know, and she loves Shakespeare. She's a Shakespeare nerd. She worked at Oregon Shakes for a long time. And now she's kind of like a retired actor a little bit. Now she's like more into music. But one time we were supposed to be playing at a bar in Hell's Kitchen. We showed up, we brought all these people, all these fans showed up to see us. And then very quickly we realized that there was another group there to perform. The venue had double booked us, and the other group that was performing was Drunken Shakespeare. And I so in working this out, I was like, how are we going to split the time? We brought a lot of people who are expecting to hear us play, and the venue was like, I think that you guys should just reschedule and Drunken Shakespeare should have the stage." And I was so upset. I was like, that's not happening. I was like, the Snowy Mountain Sisters are playing tonight. You know, I wouldn't take no for an answer. Of course, Brittany was there. She's the more diplomatic of the two of us. I'm a little fiery. And she was like, "Look, if I can compromise with Drunken Shakespeare, will you guys let us play?" And the guy was like, "Fine, do whatever you want." So she went and she knew a bunch of the Shakespeare people, and like lightly knew them through different things. And she said, we really, really don't want to go home tonight without playing. Can we please share the stage with you? Can you do a shorter set, and then the band will play the rest of the night?" And they agreed to it. And I don't think if Brittany had been there, I don't think we would have been able to broker an agreement. I think it took her like her diplomatic spirit, and like the fact that she's like a Shakespeare nerd and comrade. I feel like that's why it happened. Well, in the latter half of the Shakespeare's set that they were doing, they called people to have a short monologue contest, and they had enlisted a bunch of people to come up and be to partake in this contest. Well, Brittany jumps up and she says, "Can I jump in? Can I jump on the list?" And so she participated in this monologue contest. And it's kind of a you had to be there thing, but I just remember like the whole room was quiet when she was performing. Everybody was just on their toes and on the edge of their seats. And she walked through the entire bar, and then she got up on the bar, like on the bar counter, and she was doing her monologue up there. And like no permission, no like it no qualms about it. It was incredible to watch her like blossom into this into Juliet. She was doing a Juliet monologue,
Mm.
and have this entire bar be on the edge of their seats. And she ended up winning the contest. And then in the end, she made a big announcement that we were playing afterward, and that to stay for the Snowy Mountain Sisters. So all the Shakespeare people and all the bluegrass people kind of like came together that night. And yeah, I It was fun to see my sister get to do both of those things, and she's such a nut. She's so nutty, and her mind works in strange ways. And so it was fun to see her do that.
Thank you so much for listening. If you want to keep up to date with the podcast or get connected, follow me on Instagram and check out some of the other episodes and hear their stories on What We Share.